my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. Today's episode is sponsored by Ergobaby. Founded in 2003, Ergobaby has pioneered the gold standard for comfortable, ergonomic, soft-structured carriers. Their commitment to providing parents with the foundation to thrive has launched the company into creating a broad range of award-winning products that fit into families' daily lives seamlessly, comfortably, and safely, where function and quality are not compromised. In 2020, they launched Everlove by Ergobaby, a first-of-its-kind baby carrier buyback and resale program, a sustainability effort to support families and the planet. At the end of this episode, I'm talking to Brandy from Ergobaby all about their new fabric they're using on their Embrace carrier, which is a really great carrier to use during the early days during your postpartum period. As many of you know, and many have taken advantage of, we have an online childbirth course offered for Birth Hour listeners. It's called Know Your Options, and I partnered with a lactation counselor, doula, and childbirth educator to bring you an evidence-based, fully comprehensive course. When you sign up, you get lifetime access and instant access, so you can go at your own pace, but also join in on our bi-weekly Zoom calls if you want to connect and ask any questions. Along with that, you'll also get access to a private Facebook group where you can get to know other students and ask our instructor and me anything that comes up for you while you're making your way through the course. As an added bonus, the course comes with a bonus course that's called Beyond the First Latch. This bonus course, which is also available individually for purchase but comes for free with the Know Your Options course, covers all things pumping, nursing, feeding your baby, storing milk, all the things you need to know for getting baby fed. Over the past year, we've been working really hard to update this course and make sure everything is up to date as far as evidence-based information. We also added closed captioning to all of the modules, and we've made it inclusive for everyone to take. So find out more about this course at thebirthhour.com/course, and we would love to have you join us. Today's postpartum story guest is Allison. Allison has been on the podcast before sharing her cesarean and VBAC stories, and today she's going to share her second VBAC, as well as a focus on her postpartum time when her family came down with COVID and how that really affected what she envisioned for her third baby and their postpartum time together. Allison is also a Birth Hour Know Your Options childbirth course student, so you'll hear her talk about the course as well as more specifically the Zoom calls that we have with that community and how that was a really great support for her during not only pregnancy, but coming on postpartum when she was going through some things she didn't expect. All right, let's hear from Allison. Hi, Allison. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thanks so much for coming back to the podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So we were talking before we hit record about how you're kind of a Birth Hour veteran at this point. You have two previous episodes, numbers 227 and 376. But can you just remind people a little bit about you?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Allison. I live in Madison, Wisconsin with my husband, Jesse, and our three kids, Cora, Aiden, and Ivy.
All right. So we're going to hear Ivy's story today. So let's start with your pregnancy with her.
Yeah. So we had kind of always wanted three. So kind of from the beginning, I knew it was like the beginning of like the close of this kind of like chapter in my life. So bittersweet. Just wanted to like savor everything. And right from the get-go, as just a summary of the first two, my first was a C-section, kind of a traumatic C-section. And then my second was a really beautiful VBAC. So we were planning on another VBAC for the third. And I was really looking forward to not having to like plan kind of my care provider, like all of that stuff, because I had already had like a really successful experience. So I was just ready to kind of copy and paste all of that, for this experience. But right around 5 or 6 weeks of my pregnancy, I received some pretty surprising news that our hospital midwife group was being eliminated just for some financial reasons with the hospital. And it was really devastating for our community because they were really beloved, and I had really bonded with one of the midwives, and she delivered my son, and we just had a really great relationship. And I was just really devastated to face that decision of having to either change insurance to find a new care provider that was VBAC supportive and supportive of going post dates since I went to 42 weeks with my son with no issue with the midwife. So me and another girl who was expecting her second, we rallied together. We were like, we have to do something. And we organized community support and advocacy and really just made this call to action to let our voices be heard to the hospital leadership. And we actually saved the practice. Our community as a whole was able to really voice our opinions and collectively influence the decision makers to save this really beloved midwife practice. So that was a really kind of a rough kind of start to pregnancy, just like the fact of like losing your care provider. And I know from my previous birth that really impacts your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So that was a really big win to start off the pregnancy, and we were just elated. So that was just kind of a beginning hiccup of pregnancy, but overall pregnancy went super well. My body handles pregnancy, likes to stay super pregnant. As you've heard, I tend to go to 42 weeks and did with this one as well. So I was actually still nursing my 3-year-old at the time, and I thought that would be a really great way to help induce labor early or, get that going early. And so we just kept going along, and I didn't really have any plans. I didn't know what I was planning on doing with him nursing. I just kind of was playing it by ear and seeing what he was going to do, how I was going to feel. But I ended up nursing him right up until the end of my pregnancy. And I'll just kind of jump into the birth experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that about the pregnancy. It's so interesting how even with your third baby, these things can come up with your care provider. And I feel like they almost throw you more for a loop because you're just kind of set in your ways from the previous births.
Yes, I really I had such a great experience with my VBAC that I just really wanted to have another experience like that. So we did a little bit of preparation with my third. We had done a couple birth courses. We did an in-person course for my first and the Know Your Options course with my second. So I did kind of refresh some of those modules with my third, just, since it had been 3 years, and hopped on a couple of those calls. And was kind of specifically asking about nursing a toddler in this time and just feelings about that. So that was, even in the pandemic, it was nice to have those personal connections with people as we were approaching that. Yeah.
It was interesting to me how many second-time moms we have on those Zoom calls for the course. Quite a few.
Yeah, it is. It's a really good collection of people that hop on each week. Yeah, so my blood pressure tends to kind of trend upwards a little bit towards the end of pregnancy. I think it's probably pretty common. It doesn't get anywhere that we would need to induce for blood pressure, but it is kind of something that I'm always mindful of and worried about towards the end. But I was planning on delivering again with the midwives, and Emily, who delivered my second, her and I just have a really great relationship. And I felt really bonded to her from my second, and she let me know that she really wanted to deliver this baby. So I was hopeful that was going to happen. She has a busy summer, so there's always the caveat that, one of the other wonderful midwives in her partnership would step in. But I was really hoping to have her deliver my third as well. And she knew my story. She knew me, she knew my story. I mentioned I had a traumatic first birth, and she knows my triggers. And just that is a really big piece in a provider, which I was really thankful that we were able to keep her as my care provider, because I really felt safe and supported with her. And that to me is one of the biggest factors in having a really successful birth experience, is feeling safe and supported in whatever environment you choose. And for me, I felt really good going to the hospital. And so we scheduled the induction for 42 weeks right on the day. And I was feeling very done with pregnancy. And so I was welcomed, being induced. I had a really good experience with induction, so I wasn't worried about any of that. So I drove myself to the hospital just like I did last time. Kind of the day started out just mirroring my first VBAC, which was kind of cool. I drove myself there. My husband dropped the kids off at daycare. And I arrived at the hospital, walked down that long hallway and checked myself in, which was just kind of an empowering feeling. Like, I'm here, I'm doing this. And my husband came, Emily came, we set up the room. Just like labor started going. I actually think I started going into very early stages of labor because I had dilated to 3 and lost my mucus plug that morning, which my body typically shows no signs of labor until I am hooked up to Pitocin. So that was really encouraging and kind of cool that my daughter seemed like she was ready to come that day as well. So we started with Pitocin, we hung out, I ate. It was just fun being with people that I knew. My birth photographer, who was also my doula, came, and we just had kind of a really fun morning just hanging out. And active labor started around 2:30 that afternoon, and it just started kind of slow and progressed pretty quickly. I labored standing up, laying down with the peanut ball, and then I moved to the tub, which was just I love laboring in the tub. And I got into the tub and had like 2 contractions in the tub and started feeling a little bit pushy. And my doula, Nicole, was like, Allison, are you feeling a little pushy? And so I had Emily check me, and while I was in the tub, and she said I was about a 7, but thought that things were going to move pretty quickly, which they did, because 2 or 3 contractions, very intense contractions later, I had her check me again because I was starting to push, and I was telling her, I know you can't give birth at my hospital in this tub, but I was like, I will stop pushing if I can stay in the tub. I just really didn't want to get out of the tub. But to my kind of disbelief, I was fully dilated. So things were just moving super quickly, but I still felt really safe and in control. My team felt really safe. Like, I knew everybody super well. And so I just I felt like warm and cozy and safe the whole time, which, and going through labor, that was super important to me. So I got out of the tub pretty slowly, took a couple contractions to work myself out of the tub. And I really wanted to labor on my hands and knees on the floor. I had labored on my hands and knees on the bed with my son, and I just felt kind of vulnerable. So I knew, and I had told them, I think I might want to labor on the floor. They were totally cool with that. So I made my way to the floor. They had kind of set up a little nest area for me with pillows and blankets on the floor. And the nurse laid on the floor to hold the monitor on my belly, because as a VBAC mom, I had to have continuous monitoring, which was totally fine with me. So I started pushing and was making some pretty good progress, moved my way up to the bed because I was just getting a little fatigued and wanted to lay somewhere a little bit more comfortable. And I pushed for about an hour. And part of that fear comes up each time for me with my C-section, trauma of the fact that because I had pushed for so long with my daughter on my first, that, I just have to kind of work through this trauma as it bubbles up for me each subsequent birth, that the baby, I was so afraid that she wasn't going to come out. But to my complete disbelief, I pushed out a 9.5-pound posterior baby on my back with no tearing. And it was, again, one of the most beautiful, I'll forever remember these 2 moments when I caught my son and when I caught my daughter, just that feeling of pulling them to my chest and knowing that I did it, that my body isn't broken, and that I did it. And I grabbed my husband's hand and we held our little baby, and we checked. We didn't know if it was a boy or girl. And so it was just that really wonderful moment of finding out that she was a girl. And I reached down and I grabbed my midwife's hand and I just thanked her and thanked my husband, thanked my doula, and just thanked everybody in the room, just because I felt so incredible. And overall just had a really beautiful birth experience. So she was born at 6:30 p.m. So it was pretty quick. Active labor was only about 5 or 6 hours, I would say. And she was born, and she was a beautiful completion to our family, little Ivy.
All right. And no surprise guests this time?
No. January, Harshi came to my second birth as a surprise, and nope, she was not there, although I did read her book and she is just a really inspirational person to me. So, kind of had that memory going, but this birth was like a carbon copy of my other VBAC. It was everyone, crazy. My midwife and my doula, we were like that. It felt like deja vu. Like I have pictures, like she was the same birth photographer, and like some of the pictures I was wearing the same robe. Like it was the same midwife, same time of day. It was really deja vu, which was great because that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted just basically to have a carbon copy of that birth experience because it was so perfect. And to my surprise, that's actually what happened. So it was really great.
That's awesome. That does not happen very often.
No, it doesn't. And I was kind of waiting. They always say like third babies are like a wild card. So this whole time I've been kind of like waiting, like, okay, what's the wild card? I thought that it was like the midwife practice getting, cut and then reestablished. Later, I think I've come to find out that it was our postpartum experience.
Yeah. We've heard a bit about that on the Know Your Options Zoom calls, but I was glad you were wanting to share because I think it'll be helpful to people. Yeah.
So we are still, as you know, like in a pandemic, and we hadn't had COVID the entire time, as to our knowledge. My husband and I got vaccinated and had vaccinated our older daughter, and we're really taking a lot of precautions. And especially leading up to my birth, I was being really careful because I did use nitrous oxide in the birth, and that was one of the things that I wouldn't have access to if I had tested positive before. And it was a helpful tool for me, especially in the the fundal massage. That's actually when I use the nitrous the most. And we were just being super careful. So we got up to our room, and I had tested negative before we went to the hospital. They had to do like a procedural test. And so we had a really great few days in the hospital, just like recovering. The hospital is really family centered. So there's like a nice big double bed. So like my husband and I kind of talk about after we've had a kid, like that hospital, after you have a baby, after you have another kid, kind of feels like, I call it like a toddler vacation because it's just so quiet and peaceful. And like all we had to do was just snuggle our little baby. And so we had a super great few days in the hospital, and my daughter was born on a Wednesday and we came home on a Friday. When we came home, my son had like a wet cough. He wasn't acting super sick, but like he had his energy levels, but he was just like, I immediately, like mother's intuition, I was like, oh, he's definitely like got some sort of a bug. And I wasn't too worried because like I was nursing. And so I knew my daughter Ivy would have like antibodies, and we just kind of kept our distance that day. And we had helpers in the house, my mom was there taking care of my older two, and, took them out to dinner and stuff, and just kind of, kept them away from us so that we could settle in. And then, so the first night was fine. I had kind of like a tickle in my throat, but didn't really think too much of it. Cause like hospitals, the air is a little bit different. It just, you're like not in your usual space. And so I didn't really think too much of it. But Saturday I had just like a splitting headache, and I just felt off kind of during the day. And then Saturday night rolled around, and in the hospital, the nurses had asked a couple times if, when they come and do their care checks, they had asked me a few times, I think it was just a standard question, if I had any upper right quadrant pain. And I had always said no. And as I was sitting around at home, I was like, just something was like uncomfortable. And so I called my midwife on call line and talked to one of the nurses, and was just like, if I was in the hospital, I would have answered yes to that question. It's not super painful, but it was like discomfort. And I feel like I'm really in tune with my body. And just, I know that there could be some complications. I had heard on the podcast, that's honestly where I got a lot of my pregnancy and birth information was from this podcast. And I'd heard that you can actually develop preeclampsia postpartum. And I had had a few blood pressure readings in the hospital and leading up to the birth that were like high, not like emergency high, but like definitely higher than normal. And so that was kind of in the back of my mind. And so I called the nurse on call. She actually connected me to the midwife on call, which happened to be my midwife, Emily, which was just really great because I had just seen her. Her and I have a, pretty good relationship. And so she walked me through some of the things to pay attention to. And I didn't have a blood pressure cuff at home at the time. And since I was feeling okay and didn't have any other symptoms like vision changes or things like that, she was okay with having me stay home for the night, but wanted me to go get a blood pressure cuff or come get evaluated that next day. And so we went to get a blood pressure cuff that morning, and my blood pressure was really high and my heart rate was actually super high. My resting heart rate was like 125, which for me is just like workout level high. And I was just uncomfortable. And so I immediately called her back because she just gave me her phone number. I'd had it, and she was like, just give me a call directly. I'm on call for the rest of the weekend. So I called her and let her know my numbers. And so that was Sunday, and it was a little like touch and go whether or not I'd have to kind of go back to the hospital. And I just randomly took a COVID test. It wasn't on our radar because we hadn't had an exposure that we knew of. I did this swab and I put it on the counter, and I told my husband, that did this. I'm sure it's negative, but whatever. I went to go to our room to take a nap, and he walked in with my daughter a couple minutes later and just was like, it's positive. And I couldn't sleep because my head was hurting so bad. And I just broke down in tears because I had a baby 4 days prior, didn't know how this was going to affect me postpartum, and was really nervous about my baby getting it. And just illnesses in general. I have general anxiety and definitely postpartum anxiety. And so I was just really nervous about our health, and I was just not doing super well. And so I called my midwife back and told her that I tested positive for COVID. And it was actually kind of a relief that we knew that there might be a cause to my blood pressure and my tachycardia, because those symptoms can arise with COVID. And, a couple days postpartum, she said it is normal to have your blood pressure rise a little bit, but definitely not as high as it was. But just combined with everything going on, it felt good that we kind of had a reason for it. So the whole family ended up getting it, except Ivy never tested positive. And my son, Aiden, actually never tested positive either, even though he had the same symptoms the whole time. So throughout the next week, I actually was in touch with Emily daily. She would check in on me, ask how we were doing. And it was just really great. It was a great feeling to know that I had someone who I felt really safe with, who was making sure that I could stay monitored while staying home, because it wasn't yet to the point that they would need to intervene at any point. So she was comfortable monitoring me at home. And it just felt really good to know that I could keep my baby home. I was just really nervous about having to take her into the hospital with me. Unfortunately, we did have to take her to the ER one day because her temperature was above 99.4, which was on our discharge papers as something to call your provider about. And they actually encouraged us to just take her to the ER for monitoring, because that's where they would have to do the monitoring anyway. That was actually one of my worst fears in postpartum, is just having to take your brand new baby back to the hospital, especially to the ER in a time like this where there's just every germ imaginable there. But thankfully the ER really worked really well with us. Since I was positive, they got us in and out pretty quickly, and they were just really sympathetic of our situation and really made me feel at ease that she was safe, she was okay. I was really glad that they monitored her. She tested negative that day in the ER, and Emily was really great and called me right before I went into the ER and was like, if you need to get admitted, let me know. that she'll work with the hospital to like get me a room because I was postpartum. I had to pack my peri bottle in the hospital bag and like breast pads, and like my body was still recovering, and it was just really difficult to have to like be thinking about, okay, where am I going to go to the bathroom that I can clean up my bleeding and use a peri bottle? Like, it's a lot normally postpartum, but to have to do that in places that make you feel even more vulnerable was really difficult. So to have someone who was really supportive of me and wanted to make sure my needs were met, as well as my baby's, was really great. Thankfully, we didn't have to get admitted, so we didn't have to do that. But we got home and just took things really slow. I pretty much sat in the recliner in my living room for like a week straight, just like nursed her, ate, drank water. Slowly, all of our symptoms just kind of subsided. My milk came in pretty strongly. So at one point I was a little worried that I was getting mastitis, and my breasts were really sore. So it was just, I think my body was like on the hot mess express. Like, it didn't know up from down. Like, everything was sore, and it was just in the moment. It didn't feel super overwhelming, but I was just trying to get like moment to moment. But then a week later, like when we were kind of recovering and I was telling someone about it, about my experience, she was like, that is so much. And it kind of dawned on me like how much we went through in that week. And it was just like really a lot to have a kid, a new baby and all those things going on. And in the meantime, I had to kind of wean my son. I nursed him the day I went into labor. He was 3, just over 3. And I had just decided in that moment that I couldn't tandem nurse. There was just like too much going on. And with him being like kind of actively sick, I just didn't know what to do. So on top of all of this, I had to go through like the really like emotional toll of like weaning a toddler who was definitely not ready to wean. He's still quite not ready to be done. But that was just really emotionally hard because he would just cry out for me, and I had to, just keep kind of firm in my boundaries that was something that I couldn't take on. The isolation, just like not being able to, I had to send my daughter to her pediatrician's appointment without me. I had to like wait outside, just like the isolation of having COVID. It like, even 2 years out from the pandemic, like the state, like I just like kind of felt like dirty in a sense. Like, I don't know, the isolation around it was really difficult. So I was actually super thankful that in this new age, there's all these like online support groups. Mm. Like my midwife hosts an online support group. So like when I was in my active like 5-day period, like I was able to hop on a Zoom call and like talk to my midwife, talk to other moms who are going through not exactly what I was going through, but just like going through early motherhood. And that was really, really helpful. I'm not sure I would have been able to just like handle complete isolation without just like the support of other moms and, around going through what we were going through.
Yeah, I know that this whole pandemic level has added so much of that loneliness for so many people. Postpartum can already be really isolating, but when you like have COVID in your house, it's definitely a whole nother obstacle.
Right. So, and I was able to join the Know Your Options Zoom a couple weeks later. Which was just nice to see like familiar faces that I had seen, before, and just that whole, like, just a sense of community that like, in postpartum, it's difficult to like get out of your house and like be on time for something. And so it's just kind of nice to be able to do that from home, I can like nurse in the comfort of my house and all of that. So yeah, it was, looking back, a pretty challenging experience. And I know that it likely will be something that someone else goes through because there's definitely still COVID cases on the rise, and just like there's all the restrictions. Like we had to keep our kids out of daycare during that time as well.
Yeah, that's like the hardest part when you're counting on that alone time with the newborn.
Exactly. We had specifically kept them in full-time daycare. for those, like that first month, just because we wanted time to bond with our baby and to have their structure. So it was just like, it almost felt like the early pandemic days where you're just kind of on survival mode. And my husband and I like barely saw each other because he had to handle the older two and I was handling the baby. So yeah, it was one of those experiences where you look back and you're like, how did we do that? That was definitely survival day by day.
Yeah, I remember when you came back on the Zoom calls for the Know Your Options course and you were telling us everything. And I feel like everybody had the same kind of reaction as your friend of just like, oh my gosh, you've been through so much.
Yeah, like it's so much. But I'm really grateful that we all had overall pretty mild cases. It's just like going through any illness with a newborn, but especially one that's like unknown. And I mean, we're learning more about it, but it's just like, any illness with a baby is difficult, but one that's like, been the front line of your thoughts the last 2 years is.
Yeah. And just all the regulations around it. Like, I mean, if everybody had just had a cold, you would have been, as soon as everyone didn't have a fever, they go back to daycare or whatever. It's not like anyone's being quarantined for 10 days and that kind of thing. So,
yeah. And it was like each one of us tested positive like a day or two after. So in my mind, I just kept bumping out the date that my 3-year-old could go back to daycare.
Yeah.
And I was like, 5 more days, like another 5 days, another 5 days. And it was kind of just like, when can I get off this like roller coaster?
Yeah. And you're paying for the daycare in the meantime. That's the hard part. I think some daycares are starting to kind of reevaluate their protocols. I know ours is because we actually got on a call with all the parents, and one thing somebody brought up was with the infant room. She was like, there were several cases of RSV and we didn't shut down the infant room.
Right.
But for COVID, we do. And RSV is actually way more dangerous for infants than COVID. So
exactly. Yeah.
It's just a lot to figure out for sure.
Yeah, but we were very thankful that our kids were able to go back to daycare. We signed them up for an additional full week because we just wanted like another break.
Yeah.
Just to like give ourselves time to recuperate when we were feeling healthy and like bond with Ivy. And she, with like nursing, I was surprised actually that since I nursed my son through pregnancy, I kind of thought that I would kind of skip that like first week nipple pain, but definitely did not. Those newborns just like know how to make your toes just like curl from the pain. For me, I knew it only lasted like a week, but I was surprised that I had to go through it again. And she is my most unique nurser because I thought she was tongue-tied like my son was. I had her evaluated. She doesn't have any ties, but she nurses like a tongue-tied baby because she has kind of a dysregulated suck, breathe, swallow pattern. So we're working on that. I'm glad that my community has some really great lactation services around. So, I mean, she's growing. She's definitely transferring plenty of milk, but nursing doesn't seem like super relaxing to her yet. So I'm hoping that we can get there. But it's always kind of a roller coaster. You never quite know. Like, I'm a seasoned breastfeeder now that I've been doing it for 5 years, but like she's not. She's new. She's got to learn. It's like a partnership. So each baby has definitely been unique. And I would say her third baby wild card was definitely our postpartum experience because we were not expecting any of that to happen. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, overall, I was super happy that I had the continued support of my family and my doula. My photographer was checking in on me, and my midwife is just phenomenally amazing. Just like knows me really well. And I think feeling safe in birth, and in postpartum really helped me avoid having this be like a really emotionally difficult time. I mean, it was, but I think having a really good support system in place and having people that knew me definitely made it a lot easier.
Yeah, you had the best team assembled around you, and I love that all of their care just carried over into postpartum for you.
Yes, definitely.
All right, Allison, well, do you have any resources you want to share?
I kind of mentioned the January Hershey book is really great. I read it again, some of the chapters, and I would say I linked the ICANN Facebook group. So I'm super passionate about VBAC knowledge, empowerment. And so that Facebook group, it's the I Can closed Facebook group. And hopefully you can put the link maybe on the show notes page because sometimes the group is a little hard to find.
Okay.
I've come across a lot of VBAC and C-section like support groups online. And this one is really just, it's very evidence-based, supportive in any avenue that you may choose, whether that's a repeat C-section, an unplanned repeat C-section, or a VBAC. It's a really great online support group with a lot of great resources and has been super helpful throughout planning my first VBAC and touching base with a couple items that I wanted to kind of refresh for the second. And then find support wherever you are, whether that's the Know Your Options, like the various like birth hour support groups, because those have been super helpful for me over the past 3 or 4 years, but also just like local mom groups, local support groups. Zoom offers a lot of great like online options nowadays. I know a lot of like mothers groups are still doing that. So I would just say find your group while you're still pregnant, because those early days, you just want to be able to easily like log on or like call somebody or meet up with somebody if that's what you choose, because having support in those early postpartum days, even for subsequent babies, is very, very helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that those types of groups when you're pregnant, it's actually one of the easiest ways to make friends as an adult, because you have this thing in common of growing a human, even if you don't have anything else in common. So it's a great way to have connection for during pregnancy, and then more importantly, even postpartum and when you have a little baby and maybe time off from work and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I feel like nowadays, just on social media and stuff, we don't see often what's difficult with motherhood. We see a lot of what's going really great, like the highlight reel.
Yeah.
And what I found in a lot of these like mom groups is that people get really real and they're like, this is really hard, or I'm going through something really difficult, or this problem that we're having. And like celebrating good things. But for me, it's been super helpful knowing that I'm not alone, that my kids don't sleep. I'm not alone that, something doesn't go as I thought. With my first birth, going through and processing birth trauma, like the fact that I realized I wasn't just the one that felt like a failure, like that was really huge to kind of see those things that generally aren't talked about on social media. Like it's just really helpful to know that we're all in this together and someone somewhere has likely experienced what you're going through.
Yeah, completely. And I think that even with like the Know Your Options Zoom calls, like I'm a few years out from having babies, but I'll be doing something and I'll remember something someone else said that they went through. So, and make me feel better. So
yeah, right.
You gotta have those parenting alliances for sure.
Yes, for sure.
All right. Well, where's the best place for people to reach out to you?
You can find me on Instagram. My handle is Allie, ALLI, Lynch, LYNCH 14. And it's set to private, but feel free to send me a message if you want to connect. Otherwise, you can email me if you're not on social media, AllisonGLynch@gmail.com. And that can be put in the show notes as well.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for coming back and sharing this most recent experience with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. The birth hour has been a huge part of my life the last 5 years, and hopefully it will just continue to be a source of my walk entertainment.
I hope so. It's always fun to see your name pop up in the groups because I'm like, oh my gosh, she's been here for so long.
Yeah. It's been a huge, huge part of my life. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for saying that. All right. Thanks again for coming on.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
All right, now I'm going to talk to Brandy about Ergobaby and their new fabric for their Embrace newborn carrier. Hi, Brandy. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today to talk with me about Ergobaby.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
All right, so we're going to be talking all about postpartum and some of the carriers that are really great for that time period. But before we get to that discussion, can you tell people just a little bit about you?
Yeah, my name is Brandy Sellers-Jackson. I am a birth and postpartum doula. I'm a writer, and I am the social media momager here at Ergobaby.
All right. So postpartum is a topic that comes up a lot on this podcast, and I know also with Ergobaby and your social media and everything. So what are some of the biggest challenges with that time period that we're dealing with?
Besides everything,
Exactly.
just pick one. This is a big one. Besides everything, you're hot. You feel like you're all over the place. You feel a lot. You are getting back into your body, and not in the sense of like the weird snapback thing that's going around, but more so
Right.
feeling at home in your body. You have a new, a baby. And even if it's your first, second, third, or fourth, it's still a new baby. And there's a learning curve that's happening. And it's a lot to keep up with. It's a lot. And it's just a weird time. I've talked about this before, recently, but it's weird. And if more people really just accepted that it's just a weird, weird time, then the better off everything would be.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's really hard to accept that until you've been in it because it's hard to, like you said, it's hard to really fully explain or wrap your head around. And so I know for myself and people I talk to as well, like their second or third babies, it's a very different experience because you kind of can appreciate what you're about to really go through.
Yeah. It's just weird. You spend your entire pregnancy being inhabited by a little person, and then said little person comes out, and you're left with you and this new little person, and it's just this weird balance of all of it. And so it's just it is a great time. I will say this, a great opportunity to learn a lot of gentleness with yourself. And we hear that so much, it sounds so overplayed, to be honest, but really all the gentleness, and really looking at it as this is my moment to just really do whatever I really want to do. And if I don't want to do it, then not doing it, because it's just a weird time.
Yeah, I love that. And I totally agree. Okay, so obviously, like you said, we could talk about so many different things when it comes to postpartum because everything really changes. But we're here to talk about Ergobaby. So I do want to really focus on baby wearing and how you guys have made that, more accessible, especially in those first few weeks. I know when I had my first baby 10 years ago, I had an Ergobaby carrier, and it, you had to get a separate infant insert, and it was all these things. But now you guys have really developed different products for different stages. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Ergobaby has come a long way. We are upon our 20th anniversary, I believe.
Oh my gosh.
And it's, we've seen so many variations of the original carrier. First, it was just the traditional classic carrier. And then that melded into these variations where, you had to have the infant insert. And then we went into the, adapt. And that one, you didn't need an infant insert. And then, you had a 360. And then you need an infant insert for that one. But, you could have it in all the different positions. So, and then it's gone from that to Heirloom, to Embrace, to Omni Breeze, Omni Dream, so many different carriers. And the thing that I love about Ergobaby is that we constantly strive to improve, but more so specifically, and I think most importantly, to make life easier for parents. Life is hard enough. Life is hard enough, especially these past 2 years that a lot of parents and people have been through. And baby wearing, caring for your children, if we can provide a little bit of respite and a little bit of just in the process, I think it's needed. So I love Ergobaby. We're constantly trying to make things easier. Yeah, I'm really proud of that.
I think that you guys do such a good job of connecting with your customers as well. Like, I'm obviously out in the baby world too, and I see Ergobaby set up at pretty much every type of baby event there is, and you're helping people, do fit checks and try on and see what's most comfortable. And so I know that when you're developing new products, it's because you're doing it for your customers that you've talked to.
Absolutely. I that's what attracted me so much to, even coming on board with Ergobaby was just, the heart behind it, that we want to see parents succeed and to feel seen, and then also to feel like humans again, which is also why I love baby wearing. It allows parents, new parents, and by new parents, I mean new parents, but new parents to feel like humans again. You know, when you're constantly holding a baby, when you're constantly caring for a baby, when you're constantly just at the will of a baby where you can't even go pee, you begin to feel, or to take care of your basic needs like a shower, you begin to feel like you're not a human anymore. And so it's really amazing. It allows people to connect with themselves and to say, okay, I can do more things than just sit here and hold this baby.
Yeah. I'm just like nodding along while you're talking, taking me back a few years to being in it. Okay, so let's talk about the Embrace newborn carrier and the new fabric option that you guys have just launched.
Yes, so we are launching the Embrace Soft Air Mesh, and we're super excited about it because it is like the best of both worlds. You know, with the Embrace carrier, it's like a mesh between the classic soft structured carrier, but then a traditional wrap. So you have the snuggling of the wrap, but you don't have all the wrapping that you have to do with the wrap and all the tricks you got to do with the wrap. You can just cross and then click, 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 you know, into the buckles and boom, you're done. Again, making life easier for parents. So I love that. But then with the Soft Air Mesh, this new carrier, you know, we changed the fabric a bit. So, you know, with the previous Embrace, we had just the traditional fabric. This one has breathability. It has, you know, airflow. It's mesh. So it's perfect for postpartum, which is why, you know, we're all focusing on postpartum in this campaign, is because it's really, you know, it's all about postpartum. You know, it's with the Soft Air Mesh. It allows folks to just not be hot, which is another thing that people feel so much during postpartum, is this constant feeling of like, oh my gosh, is it a sauna here? Oh my gosh. Oh, it's only 60 degrees. Why does it feel like it's 90?
Yeah.
The Soft Air Mesh is great for that. You know, allows breathability, airflow, and it'll keep you kind of cool and dry and not feeling so hot. Like, who wants to feel that? No one wants to feel that.
It's so true. Even in the colder months, you're just so much hotter when you're postpartum and you wake up in sweats. And I guess maybe it's like preparing you for menopause or something, but it's unbelievable how hot you get. And with the summer coming up, it's even more so of a concern. And that was kind of my main issue with baby wearing, was living in Texas and not having options that would not just, you're not even just worried about yourself, but you don't want your baby to get too overheated.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. No, that part. It's funny. For all of my babies, I had to think about it. I was either pregnant in the summer. Yeah, I was pregnant every summer, actually, now that I think about it, with every single one of them. With my middle was I was pregnant through the summer. He's born in August. But my two fall babies, I mean, the entire summer. And I remember with my middle giving birth to him in August during a heat wave. And I would have loved to have this carrier, the Soft Air Mesh Embrace, because it was so hot. He and I were just skin to skinning it the entire time. And not because it was just, the benefits. No, because it was hot. It's really hot. It's hot. And I don't want to put on clothes. I can't.
Yeah.
So, it's
just sweating all over each other.
My gosh, so sweaty. Like everywhere is sweating, everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I love this carrier. I think that, like you mentioned, all the different wraps and things are beautiful and wonderful, but it can be a lot to figure out tying those, especially when you're healing. And I know for me, my husband was not a fan of those kinds. He was just anything I can do to get in a buckle carrier as soon as possible is what I want to do. So I think this is a great newborn carrier for everyone to use, regardless of, skill level and familiarity with baby wearing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, make it easy on yourselves.
Yes.
You get 0 prizes for and I've looked to see, do I get a prize for learning how to do X, Y, and Z? No, I don't. Nothing. I get 0 for this.
So true. You get mental prizes for making things easier on yourself, for sure.
Your brain is freed to do other things, the things you actually want to do. Yeah, I love this carrier for that. It's super simple, super easy, and super breathable.
Wonderful. I can't wait to feel this new fabric. Everything that you guys do is amazing. And I'm just so happy, as always, to be sharing about a new product from Ergobaby. So thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you so much. As always, it's such a joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you again to Allison for sharing her postpartum and birth story with us, and to Ergobaby for sponsoring this episode. As always, you can just head over to thebirthhour.com and search for Allison's name in the search bar to find her show notes page. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.